All right, hey, how's it going, everyone? Earthmaster here, checking in with an earthquake video update. January 11th, 2020, at 7:20 p.m. here, West Coast time in California, my time, and pretty much going to stick to the Puerto Rico activity with this update. Rest of the globe, of course, some deep earthquake activity around the Japan region. We're just off the coast of Japan, but the hot spot right now that we're kind of looking at, and that's kind of been on quite a few folks' mind, is the Puerto Rico area and the earthquake swarm that is taking place in this region of the world. Pretty significant swarm, just by looking at the magnitudes that have struck just today, last 24 hours of activity here on this globe, and that's going to be 2.5 and above from the USGS. Pretty significant number just today, folks. I'm going to bring the magnitude up just a little bit so we can look at some of the larger quakes that have been taking place here today. 4.8, of course, a 5.9 earlier today. 5.2, a couple 4.2s there, 4.6. Latest is a 3.8 with the green flag, and 5.2 below that. But some significant numbers there. And that's not even all the earthquakes that are taking place. Like I said, that's just the 2.5 earthquakes and above. I do want to show you guys the USGS map here real quick on a different level, if I can. And there we go. Let me fix that a tad bit there. Get the overview of the region. And hold on a second here. Bring this down. One day, all magnitudes from the USGS here of the Puerto Rico area. Hold on a second here. Bring this up a tad bit. There we go. So we got 42 earthquakes here, which doesn't seem like, well, for just today, it's a pretty significant number. I'm going to show you guys what it looks like over the last week of all magnitudes there, and it's pretty impressive. We will take a look at the Puerto Rico Trench, which is a subduction zone over there between the North American and the Caribbean tectonic plates. Kind of where the it's kind of where Puerto Rico, I guess, is kind of being squeezed in between the two, and that's kind of why we're seeing all this pressure out here right now. But there is potential with that subduction zone of seeing a much larger quake. Not saying it's going to happen, but the possibility is there. It's happened in the past. It's been, well, let's see, what do we got? 200 years since that has happened in that region of the subduction zone. Let's see here. I'll have to show you guys here in a little bit on this different map, but I do want to go back to the one day and switch us over to last 7 days of activity. And I think you guys would be pretty surprised. Of course, I always get that warning because there's just a massive amount of earthquakes there. Not specifically in this region, but over the map. So 7 days, folks. Take a look at the top left corner. 565 earthquakes just in this region here of Puerto Rico on the pretty much a southwest side of the island. And the depth of these earthquakes, like I like to watch, are pretty much, hold on a second here, around the same, at least on this area of the map. We can go down, take a look at some older earthquakes here throughout the day today, and they do vary in depths, and that's kind of a little bit scary. I wouldn't say scary. I'd be a little bothersome when we see that level of depth there being what's the word here, the difference in them. 16 kilometers there, all the way down or up to 7 kilometers. I'm trying to see if there's a deep one. I seen there was a 4 kilometer there. I thought I'd seen one a little bit deeper than 17, but there's a bunch, folks, and they all vary. They're all not the same. So that's kind of expected, right? When we see a large earthquake like we did, the 6.4 there a couple days ago. And then, of course, another large one today, the 5.9. We're going to see aftershock activity, but this is not your typical aftershock activity. With this amount of swarming going on, it's very, very possible, even if it's a slim chance, that we could see something much bigger. And it may not specifically be in this area. Up to the north there, that red line is the Puerto Rico Trench. See if I can bring up this image here for you guys. Okay, not what I wanted exactly. Let me see if I can fix that. It's not going to let me. Okay. So you just have to bear with me here. Let's see if I can blow it up a little bit and take a look at the area here. Okay, Puerto Rico. You guys can see the map right there. It says Puerto Rico, where the earthquakes have kind of taken place. This is kind of upside down, if you will. North, at least according to the map, according to the USGS map right there, it's a little upside down, but they do have it marked right there on the southwest side of the island where the earthquake activity is taking place. We would have to flip this map upside down to match this map, but we're not going to do that. But you guys get the rough idea of the Atlantic Ocean, the waters to the north of the island, right? And then the North American Plate, just to the north of that little area in between the island and the ocean I'm talking about there, the Atlantic Ocean. And that line right there is the, well, I guess if you will, the subduction zone area. And to the south here, you got the Caribbean Plate. Upper crust slides beneath Puerto Rico. There's a whole lot of movement here, folks. A whole lot of force and dynamics taking place in this region here. But it's the subduction area that I'm kind of worried about here. And we're looking at the Caribbean Plate where it goes underneath, beneath Puerto Rico. And then you got the North American Plate, right? Which runs into, slides underneath the Caribbean Plate. So in between, you're getting a little sandwich of mountains and islands being built up over time, right? Over, I don't know how old Puerto Rico is, but a long time. And there's a lot at stake here, a lot of dynamics being played with the area that these earthquakes are taking place there. Kind of just right off the island. Let me bring it up here and zoom in on this other map here. It's not really right on the island. It's just right there in that, kind of like that area where the what happened to my image here? There we go. Where the Caribbean Plate, the Caribbean Plate's upper crust slides beneath Puerto Rico. That is the area where most of this activity, if not all of it, is taking place. Hold on a second here. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more and get a little bit more detailed map here. Just off the island, just in that subduction area that they're talking about, with the Caribbean Plate going underneath here. A little bit of it might be on land, not much, a little bit. But looking at this area here over the last 7 days, it looks as though some of the migration there of quakes is going down further south away from the island. And that's telling me right there there's still an enormous amount of activity being in play here. Let's see here. I wonder if it's going to let us, let's see here. I don't know if I want to do that or not, but we'll see. So this is just 4.5 and above over the last 30 days. So this is going to show all the large earthquakes that they've had over the last 30 days. Of course, you got the 6.4 down there, the largest one that I think it killed, I don't know how many people or not. I know there were some fatalities. A lot of structural damage and some blackouts when that did hit. And that 6.4 was at a depth of 10 kilometers. Most of these large quakes, if you look at them, have occurred roughly around 10 kilometers. 5.8 there prior to the 6.4 was at about 6 kilometers. When was it? That was about a day before the 6.4, that 5.8 was. So kind of like a foreshock, if you will. But I don't think they're out of the woods yet, folks. As I mentioned, and this goes for pretty much any subduction zone type area, there's always a potential when we're seeing the swarm of a larger magnitude earthquake striking within the same region here, right, on the south side of this island. But there's also, as I mentioned, some dynamics being played in the north part of the island. And here's a little bit different view of the Puerto Rico Trench right here. I kind of wish I could... Oh, hold on a second here. Image. I just had to upload these real quick, so it's kind of just working with me here. So Puerto Rico Trench right here. There, all this is pretty much numbered or spelled out here for you. North American Plate to the north, Caribbean Plate to the south of Puerto Rico, and of course you got the subduction there, kind of squeezing the islands there. Puerto Rico right in the center there, Virgin Islands to the east. And that activity that's taken place is kind of in, this kind of gives you an idea of the seafloor out there as well. These mountain ranges that are kind of building up, probably creating new land, millions of years down the road. Let's see if I can... I don't know how close I can get there, but the area that we're seeing all this activity just kind of, it's kind of like right there in those mountainous areas. But of course, then again, the mountainous areas that we're seeing on this map right here are not 10 kilometers down. It's well below that. So we're seeing a movement down there in that subduction area of the Caribbean plate and the Puerto Rico area, where this Caribbean slides underneath it. It's kind of just like a... Oh, see here. Let me go back here real quick. There's a lot to talk about, and I don't want to ramble on too much. I kind of want to keep it quick and to the point of what's going on down in that area. I'm going to read a little bit of stuff here from an article I found. To the south of the island and south of the major 6.4 earthquake, the Caribbean plate upper crust subducts beneath the Puerto Rico at the Murdos Trough. Murdos Trough, I think I pronounced that correctly, hopefully. Puerto Rico is marked by fault in a pattern similar to many other places in the world, for example, the Pacific Rim. Puerto Rico has a definite earthquake risk compounded because its infrastructure is vulnerable. Okay, I didn't want to read that part. And we read this part. Tectonics in Puerto Rico are dominated by the North American Caribbean tectonic plates, with the island being squeezed between the two, according to the U.S. Geological Survey. So we're getting that squeezing going on there in Puerto Rico. To the north of Puerto Rico, the North American plate subducts, like I mentioned, beneath the Caribbean plate along the Puerto Rico Trench. Subduction occurs when an oceanic plate runs into a continental plate and slides beneath it. Where's the article about? Okay, so yeah, it looks like it killed one person, injured at least 9, and caused massive power outages. And according to the professional folks, a question was asked, how come they're having so many earthquakes right now? Or why is the earthquake swarm happening, right? That's why a lot of folks want to know. And according to these guys, well, we don't understand why the larger quakes continue for a while. It may have to do with a slow slip on the faults in that area, or perhaps the hydrology of the fault system. So there's not a whole lot of, I guess, definite understanding in that area. Hold on here. And also, if you guys were watching the live stream here, I talked about or mentioned in my earthquake facts of the channel that on October 18th, October 1918, which fell on the 11th, the western coast, which is kind of close to where we're at here with the earthquake activity, was hit by a major earthquake which caused a tsunami. The 1918 earthquake was caused by an old left lateral strike-slip fault near the Mona Passage. The actual subduction zone, the Puerto Rico Trench, which we've talked about, has not ruptured in over 200 years, which is a major concern to geophysicists, as they believe it may be due to, or it may, as they believe it may be due for a major event. So looking on this, you got the Puerto Rico Trench to the north, folks. There's not a whole lot of activity showing up onto the north, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to see activity there. Any kind of activity in subduction zones like this, especially when you have like two subduction zones, one to the north, one to the south. There's no activity whatsoever. Of course, let's go back to the 1 day, all magnitudes there. So nothing going on in that subduction area to the north, folks. But it's something to watch. It's something we need to watch. The Puerto Rico Trench, as mentioned, has not erupted or not ruptured in over 200 years. So, and they can have a big one. They can definitely have a big one, bigger than what we're seeing right now. Looks like January 13th, they did have another January 13th, 2014, they had a M6.4 earthquake north of Puerto Rico. And that's been, about 5 years or so on the north side. Some larger notable quakes in the area. The Puerto Rico Trench, which we talked about here, that hasn't erupted, or keep saying erupted, right? Volcanoes on my mind. Which has not had an earthquake since 1787. Back then, it was an 8.1 magnitude earthquake here. So an 8.1 in that area would definitely create a major catastrophe for that region, a tsunami that would be devastating. A couple other earthquakes here, 7.5 back in 1867 in the region as well. Not on the Puerto Rico Trench, but in the Cayman Trough. There's been a couple over time, folks. Dominican Republic, 1946, had an 8.1. More recent in the Puerto Rico Trench area, not a major one, not a full slip in this area, but they did have that 6.4 to the north, right, that I mentioned in Puerto Rico, or north of Puerto Rico. And then in 2019, they had that one in the Puerto Rico Trench, 6.0, but no major quakes. And we know that it's very possible to see an 8.1 because it's been recorded back in 1787 in the Puerto Rico Trench area. We know that it's very possible that we can see that activity occurring right there in the Puerto Rico Trench, right there on the screen. So it's an area to watch as we're seeing all this activity not calming down. It's definitely continuing. See if I can bring back my scale there. There we go. And just be on guard. If there's viewers out there watching this video out there in Puerto Rico region, Dominican Republic area, just be on guard. Have an earthquake plan if you can. I know it's a lot to think about, a lot to do, but it's definitely worthwhile to have a plan in place just in case something happens there. let's see if I covered everything here, folks. I just wanted to give you guys an idea of the tectonics down there in that region, plate tectonics in that area. And hold on a second here. That's kind of a little bit bigger than I want, but get a little bit better overview here. That area in the purple is the trench, the deeper water right there is the purple. And of course the subduction there taking place with the sandwiching of Puerto Rico and the other islands in between there. So it's just a very sensitive area, very similar to I can't say the Cascadia subduction zone because it's a lot different, but it is a subduction zone, and we're looking at pretty much both sides of it, of the Puerto Rico area. And as I mentioned, 8.1 very, very possible in that Puerto Rico Trench area. Latest activity was that 6-pointer in 2019, last year, right there in the Puerto Rico Trench. So I guess it has shown some activity. But after that 6.0, it was relatively quiet in that region. Now we're seeing that area to the south, Puerto Rico, showing lots of activity. Let's see here. So, you know, it's hard to say what's going to happen, folks. I'm going to quickly cover the rest of the globe here. I did want to pretty much keep it strictly to Puerto Rico, but what happened to that deep earthquake that was out there by Japan? It just disappeared off the globe. Let's see here. That was interesting there. I don't think I was seeing things, but anyway, that's gone. Looks like relatively quiet out here, folks. Earthquake speaking, not a whole lot of activity out here on the western part of the Pacific Ring of Fire. Of course, we've seen a lot of earthquake activity to the north over the last couple days up here around Alaska, but overall, Pacific Ring of Fire looking relatively quiet, including the west coast area. Yellowstone, I think they had a small strike up there, 2.6, within the eastern part of the park, Yellowstone National Park, that is. So that's something to watch. It didn't kick off a swarm, but there was a small earthquake up there. Oklahoma seen a little bit of activity as well, 3.4 being the largest in that little cluster of quakes, but of course they're no stranger to earthquakes out there as well. Right now, folks, just the hot spot right there in Puerto Rico. Looks like the latest earthquake over here right now, 4.2. Let me see if I can get a location on that real quick. Iran again. Of course, as most of us have heard, following the news, there was a couple moderate-sized quakes over there around their nuclear facility. This one here taking place at about 10 kilometers below the surface, 4.2. The latest earthquake here on the map. But not a lot, folks. There's no areas that stick out in my mind like the Puerto Rico area, and I think everyone can see that. And everyone's wondering what's going on. The thing is to just be vigilant in that area. Of course, with the North American plate right there. The big plate, right? It's a really big plate. It's something to watch. We could see that activity stretch north. Hopefully it doesn't in that subduction area north of Puerto Rico. But if it does, we will do an update video. Either way, we'll try to do an update video on any earthquake that takes place around the globe, 6.0 and greater. Unless it's like a 5-pointer that hits New York or some oddball place, you know. Then we'll get on here and do an update video. But anyway, I am going to end this update real quick. And thanks for watching. I hope everyone has a good night out there. And if you are watching the update video, come on over to the live stream. We are streaming 24/7 earthquake data around the globe. And I do have a Puerto Rico station brought up here on the data. That's scrolling here. Just to name a couple right now on the screen, we got China Lake in Southern California, Mendocino, California, up here along the southern part of the Cascadia subduction zone. One of my favorite stations because that's somewhat close to me. Lake Yellowstone showing relatively no activity. The Puerto Rico station is right here. Cabo Rojo, if you pronounce it like that, is the active station. As you can see, these little spike of earthquakes are indeed earthquakes. May not be large enough to trigger the earthquake notification, but they are earthquakes nonetheless that are coming in. Also Mammoth Lakes, California. That's near Long Valley Supervolcano. I got a station here in Japan to monitor that area as well. And China Lake once again coming up around the bend. So we are watching live seismos around the globe and keeping an eye on everything. Yellowstone up there on the live feed. Looks like it's working right now. It was given some technical issues earlier, but everything looks back to normal and looks pretty cold up there right now. All right, folks, have a good night. We'll chat to you guys a little bit later. Peace.